Welcome to the Practicing Accountant Podcast, your go-to resource for transforming your accounting practice. This podcast is for accountants ready to take control of their business and build their ideal practice by mastering the essentials, setting the right prices, defining a powerful niche, and selling with ease. We'll dive into strategies that boost profits, attract your ideal clients, elevate your services, and help you choose the most effective pricing models. We are champions for efficiency, value, and intentionality, and adversaries of people-pleasing, bad clients, and complacency. We provide actionable strategies to help you break the hamster wheel of typical accounting work. The mission of the Practicing Accountant Podcast is simple: to enhance your experience as an entrepreneurial accountant and help you turn neglected practices into a thriving business. So, if you're ready to level up your practice, this podcast is for you. Tune in and let's get to work.
So Raymond, I can't decide if putting podcasts out during busy season is a great idea or a horrible idea. What's your take?
I would say it's a great idea. CPAs need as much encouragement and thought leadership as they can get during these cold winter months of busy season.
Right? And instead of watching YouTube or something during lunch, they should throw one of these on and get something out of it, right?
Yeah. Get a little podcast. The other accountants riffing. Like, I never listened to podcasts back in the day when I was doing busy season, but I feel like it would have definitely helped, especially having fellow accountants on there talking about just, the struggles and the practices, and helps me know I'm not alone, so to speak.
Right. And just to kind of have that shared kind of like experience. I mean, that's one of the best things about being around accountants, or at least, listening to accountants or talking to accountants, is just being able to be with someone who you're sharing an experience with. Like, we're both busy, we're both crazy, we both didn't have time to change the oil and get our dry cleaning for the last couple months, and kind of shared commiseration, I guess.
For sure. Because I feel like I had it with my team at my CPA firm, but I feel like I do remember when I started to see some of the memes about, like the Big Four and like other just like CPA memes, and just like loving it. I was like, oh my God, I can totally relate. So I feel like now we're good to the next generation. Like, now we have memes, now we have podcasts, we have whole little comedy skits now. And so
right, totally.
I kind of like it.
Got like television shows and movies too. Did you ever see the movie The Accountant?
I did. That actually came out while I was a CPA. One of my managers had like the movie poster in his office, actually.
Totally.
It's pretty good.
Well, the sequel's coming out. So we got a sequel we've got The Accountant 2 coming out, I guess sometime this year. So
it better still have Ben Affleck. They go with a B-league actor.
Still Ben.
All right.
So we'll have I think we even did like a viewing where we took a bunch of the staff to the movie theater to watch The Accountant, and just have that moment of coolness. Like look at us. Like, look at the cool stuff we do.
Right. It's like, finally.
Right. Well, all we had before that was like The Untouchables. You remember The Untouchables, where they went after a Capone, and the accountant was the one that ultimately busted Al, and I mean the feds did the arrest and everything, but the accountant was the one that found that caught him. So there's a couple of cool stories about accountants out there. Why we digress on topics of podcasts and movies, but I'm welcoming you here today, Raymond, and excited to have you on the Practicing Accountant, and would love if you shared a little bit about yourself and what you do and who you do it for.
Awesome. And thanks for having me. Like, I really appreciate what you do with the Practicing Accountant. And name's Raymond Guns, CPA by trade. Did a very standard traditional path. Worked for an audit team of a CPA firm for a number of years, kind of get the financial statements audited, get them in order. Once we get that, nice audit letter, stamp of approval, hand those off to the tax team so they can start doing their thing. And did a number of busy seasons before leaving my CPA firm and transferring to the finance team of a large multinational pubco. And I always joke, like, kind of graduated from being a CPA to a finance professional, and really cut my teeth with the financial controller role around closing the books each month, doing that budget to actual analysis, doing the KPI and benchmarking, and kind of taking accounting's work and then looking into the future with FP&A, and kind of see how kind of holding the operations accountable to the numbers they forecasted, whether it be expense budgets or sales numbers. And did that for a number of years. And then the cannabis industry and the hemp industry is who I serve nowadays. And that's with DOPE CFO, Certified Advisors. And my role with that company, and I guess to back up a little bit, while I was working on Wall Street for, closing the books each month, going through all that thing, 2018, the Farm Bill in America created a hemp industry kind of overnight. And my friends and family have been cultivating in Michigan and Colorado and Oregon, states that had legal medical cannabis, legal adult use. And so once other people got into the hemp industry, they tapped me on the shoulder like, hey, Ray, like you're a CPA, like, can you help me with the taxes of this company? Because a lot of CPAs weren't touching hemp and cannabis because A, it's still federally illegal, but B, it's just a new industry. And to be candid, they were busy, serving older established industries. And so started doing the taxes. And then as a startup industry, it was, startup companies. And so it's like, hey, like I can do your taxes, but I need financial statements. And they'd be like, here they go. But like, I don't know if they balance or if everything really works. And so like very quickly see balance sheets with like multiple accounts receivable accounts. You're like, this is just not how this is supposed to work. Who's doing your accounting? Why did they set it up this way? And then it was like, well, I'm a startup company, so I did it, or my brother Jim did it. And it's like, all right. So took over the accounting so I could build good financial statements so that we could do the taxes properly for these hemp companies. And through that was able to build a book of business. And that's where I met DOPE CFO. So kind of my role with them, they're originally an education company and kind of like took their education to learn how to run a solo accounting firm, a solopreneur, so to speak, and did that. And then kind of ended up joining their team now in my current role because I was doing a lot of business development and lead generation for my own practice. So I do the same thing now, but just for all of our franchisees. And I know we'll get into that a little bit in the future, but that's kind of my background is just, CPA turned auditor, turned finance professional, turned business owner, turned cannabis industry, finance solution architect. Not to make it sound more fancy, I just find finance solutions for startup companies, which like it's its own little beast. But that's kind of me. That's my background. That's what I do.
Well, it's so crazy. Like it's hard to believe still in this day and age that a new industry can pop up. Like in 2018 when it's legalized. I mean, like can you name like another one in the last decade that just popped up? I mean, I guess you could say crypto. You might be able to say, I don't know. I kind of end there, but it's just so cool that it's a brand new industry. Now, would you say that accounting firms, and I know you can't speak to this, maybe you can, but in general, are more receptive to working with cannabis now than they were, 5 years ago, 7 years ago?
Oh yeah, for sure. And what's happening is every year a new state. We got 50 states. Every year, a new state will legalize medical cannabis. So that kind of like adds legalization at the state level. And then once they switch from medical to adult use, the market just grows exponentially. And so that alone is pulling in more CPAs because what happens is the business owners of these new startup companies have usually been successful business owners in other industries. That's why they're getting into it. And so it's like what happened was like, hey, I'm already the CPA firm for a construction company. And now this construction company business owner applied for a license in Maryland. Like that's a state that's kind of like coming online. And now he won. And so now he's starting a cannabis cultivation facility. And so then his like CPA from his construction company gets pulled into his cannabis company. And so like that's pulling people in. And then just as more states legalize, like they do get comfortable with it. And how it normally happens is like this one tax CPA is like at the manager level. Then he's got to convince his like director, who's got to convince the partners that it's okay to serve cannabis. But it's
I was in public accounting when this was, being legalized. And I mean, the conversation at our table was no, we're not going to touch that. And we're going to wait and see. And we're going to, until the feds do something. And I know that has changed. That conversation at that table has changed and has changed in a lot of firms and a lot of offices and a lot of homes. That there's a much it is widely. How many states are we at now? Do you know off the top of your head?
So there's about 24 states that have adult use legalized cannabis, and then out of the 50 states, I think there's over 40 that have some version of medical cannabis, and so it's definitely a growing sector. And to your point, it's like there's not a lot of growing industries, or at least ones that are growing at this clip. Like, so there's like a lot of the companies are small startups, but there's so many of them and they're being created so quickly that like there's just a lot of work to do. And I always joke like there's for sure crypto, but then like the internet and the internet created e-commerce and like an explosion of companies selling things online, financial services online. Like people used to have to go to a bank. Like now we have online banking. Like that just didn't exist in the 90s. And so like I was too young for the internet and all like the explosion of tech companies and software and e-commerce companies, but I'm in like the prime of my career to serve this cannabis company like explosion that's creating. And so it's interesting for
I've
sure.
had
It's one
on my
thing.
to-do list to go to the bank to change an account and do some things for like a month. And I just don't want to do it. I don't want to go to the bank. Why can't I have that on my app? Why isn't that something I can do on my app? It drives me
And you
nuts.
notice it too, because it's for sure there's so rare things that you need to go in that when you do, it's like I gotta
Right.
schedule it on my calendar.
Right.
Like this
I got
is,
to put my tie on, and I got to go to the bank today.
and then like they ask for documents in electronic form, and you're like, wow, what am I even doing here? Now I still need to go home and open up the
Right.
link from the email.
I emailed in. Come back next Saturday. So you started. I think you said that Dope CFO started as kind of an educational business, but tell us about Dope CFO today.
Yeah, so it has two distinct phases, and now there's they're kind of this one and the same. But yeah, it was originally started as an education company for CPAs to teach them about the cannabis industry tax strategy, and then that also evolved into like teaching just CPAs how to run a solo business or like a solo practice, and so it did that where it was like the way that we fundamentally think through running a business is you have new sales, sales fulfillment, and back office. So like once you have those three areas dialed in with SOPs that are repeatable and replicable, you kind of have like a pretty good base of your business. So that's what it was originally, as an education business to teach people how to not only serve the cannabis industry, but realistically run your own firm. And then over the last 3 years, which is when I joined the team formally, is we're a franchise now. We still do education. So if you want to run your solo practice, you can still come there and be educated. But now we're running the franchise model where we're actively serving cannabis business owners again. And it's kind of like, it's valuable for us, the franchise, because it just keeps us sharp on client service and how to stay up to date on just the tech, our tech stacks, client desires, changes in like the industry norms. And then also it allows us to kind of participate in our niche focus of the cannabis industry, where it's like you accumulate a lot of knowledge when you just do one thing every day, every week. And so yeah, the franchise is growing, and we kind of think like we're solving a couple of problems that like the founder, Andrew Hunziker, awesome dude, CPA for a number of years with the Big Four. And it's like we kind of thought there was like issues of like either compensation, client appreciation, work-life balance. And so we kind of try to remedy a lot of that with Dope CFO, because like we used to be CPAs and we're like, hey, like we want a little better work-life balance. We want our clients to really get excited when we have meetings and get on the calls. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do at Dope CFO.
I tried to find it before this conversation, but I swear I can still remember on like the last page or two of a Journal of Accountancy from way back when your founder had like a 1-page like Dope CFO article, and it was kind of like the letting the world know that he existed, and it stuck with me for however many years it's been since I saw that article, and just remember. I think I remember feeling like how bold, like how awesome, and how bold for him to like really embrace this earlier than the norm. Being on the innovation curve. He's on the front end of that, an innovator of being someone who's going to build this expertise, and it really stood out to me. And it's so cool. You guys are still doing it. And you said something too that my partner Dan and I are big on, which is niching and really developing an expertise. And one of the reasons we're such advocates of it is because it gives you pricing power. It gives you the ability to charge an amount because not only of the service you provide, but because of the expertise you bring, the understanding of the industry you bring, the knowledge you bring, the knowledge of having worked with all these other similarly built and running companies, that you add so much more value to a cannabis company having that depth into a niche. It just gives you a lot of flexibility to charge more for what you're worth.
For sure. And like we always kind of joke with like kind of any offer, it's like it's just the equation of like how much value do you provide the client, because your price needs to be below it. So like if you're just providing a little bit of value, and like we just we're CPAs, so it's like we're originally like, well, we're going to sell audits and taxes, and it's like there's value in that. Like it needs to get done. You gotta pay taxes. but like there's a cap of the value. Whereas like once you start getting into FP&A and more future view looking guiding of these companies and like expanding profit margins at the gross profit, operating profit, profit after tax, then you kind of don't have a cap on the value because the companies can grow exponentially. And so like as for like getting into that niche focus of like, I'm just going to help cannabis companies grow their companies, then you can, your value goes up as the company goes up. So your price goes up. Cause like for better or for worse, the cannabis business owners and business owners in general, like I remember this outside of the industry, it's like, they just see a tax return for their business. Like whether they have 3 entities or 13 entities, they're like, it's just the taxes. We got to file the taxes. So it's like, even if as the company gets more complex, like getting the audit done and the taxes filed is still only thought of as like this valuable. Whereas like when you bring in, which we do is like kind of the month end close FP&A function. It's like, oh, the company's growing. We need to bring on a new company. So now we need all of the forecasting for this company and we need all of that entity's accounting to roll up and consolidate up into the larger one. And so then your value just goes up as the company goes up. So that's why it's like niching down definitely helps. And just purely from like the marketing and advertising side, I know accountants hate marketing and advertising and branding, but it's like, it's hard to be relevant in one industry. So like, I can only imagine trying to be relevant in 2 industries. And like, and most CPAs are trying to be relevant in any industry that will like talk to them. And I'm like, dude, like we're struggling to just go deeper and deeper with one. And it's like, and we see like the flywheel of referrals kick in because there's a supply chain, right?
Sure.
And because we dial into say manufacturing, the manufacturing is still getting raw material from other vendors. Then they can introduce us to the cultivators and the product manufacturers are selling their products down the supply chains. Then they can introduce us to the business owners that are distributors, retail store owners. And so whereas like if you're doing construction one day, then real estate another day, then tech on Friday, none of those industries talk to each other in any meaningful way. So that's kind of another, odage to like niching down is like, yes, you can price higher for individual clients, but it's also easier to generate leads and more clients because they all talk to each other, like we're accountants. We talk to each other as, accounting business owners, and it's the same in every other industry. They all got their groups.
Well, you said 2 things there I want to double back on. First one, the way you phrased what the words you used were help them grow their business, i.e., a DOPE CFO franchise is speaking to one of their clients or potential clients, and their role they're taking is to help them grow their business. It's not, I'm going to help you get your tax returns done. I'm not going to help you do your books. It's not, I'm going to help you, with some task that I do. I'm going to help you grow your business. That's such a powerful way to approach a market. And to your point, that's where the value is, right? That's where the customer, the client is going to be willing to pay a different price for helping them grow their business versus help reporting what they've already done. It's a much different effect. So I appreciate the way you said that. And then the second thing, I love what you just exposed there. When you do niche and niche, especially in this industry, like, there are the ones that have the shop where you can go and buy stuff, but then there's this supply chain, there's this vendor chain all the way through that is exposed and available through that niche. So it's not just, one type of company. It's, it's this entire series, this ecosystem of businesses within it that becomes open with that expertise.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I'm from Wisconsin, so we have like a logging history and like tons of like paper mills and whatnot. So I have tons of family owned construction companies. So it's like, I kind of think of it, because this was my plan B. It's like, well, if cannabis doesn't work out, like I'm just going to work with GC and general contractors because I know they're buying lumber from lumber yards. They're buying siding from siding companies. They're buying roofing from roofing companies. And so I was like, all right, if I just serve construction guys, I'll get all of their vendors for roofing companies, siding companies. And then honestly, they're selling to homeowners and maybe the homeowner owns a business. So like, I always kind of thought of it as like a supply chain because it's like, it's easier to sell when you get introduced to somebody. Like I've never been really into like cold calling people and just
client referrals, like the easiest and best way to grow a business is just having happy clients talking about how happy they are with what you're doing for them. I picked up a couple of things that are exciting here because my next question is what's exciting in DOPE CFO these days. But the fact that there are still, 26 states out there that have not really fully opened this up and legalized it in that adult space, that to me is exciting because it's a lot of business out there that hasn't even shown up yet.
that should be arriving based on the trends that we're seeing, right? And the fact that you've grown in your franchises and become this resource, this almost complete one-stop shop on how to set up a business, either through education or through help with the franchise, is exciting. What else is exciting in DOPE CFO world these days?
So for us, and again, it kind of comes to like being fortunate that we're serving the birth of an industry. Like it's truly like a once in a career opportunity. And like, I was too young for the internet, but I study startups and I study founders. And so like, I've read about a lot of these tech guys and like the innovations that were coming. And then like, there was also a ton of capital and finance that like was there to support the birth of the industry. So like right now, like for sure, like historical accounting is cool. Future view FP&A is cool. But for me right now, like I'm excited about capital management and like learning more about raising capital, deploying capital. How do we actually talk to sources of capital, whether it's debt or equity? And then realistically, like if you raise a mess of capital, like you can get paid for that. And so it's like, all right, like how can we structure this? Like I know I'm not a broker, but like I can connect two dots here. And because this industry has so much kind of activity that's happening, it's like kind of like a boiling, pot. It's very interesting. And so I would say like, that's kind of an exciting thing too, of like, we're CPAs by trade. And like, yes, of course, like there is taxes in cannabis and there is audits, but there's all this like other fun stuff that's happening now too, where companies are merging. So there's like mergers and acquisitions. The nature of a startup industry, there's a ton of failures. So companies that raise capital are now going out of business and entering receivership. And so like my teammates have been a part of, litigation, selling cannabis companies, and it's more on the CVA side, like valuing the cannabis company assets, valuing the business as a whole. And so once you are, kind of start to look at the industry as a whole, like, oh, cool, we can do audits, we can do CVA, we can talk to investors on behalf of our clients and support capital raises and the due diligence process. And so because the industry is very capital intensive, like at the end of the day, like you need a facility to grow this plant. You need a manufacturing factory to like turn the plant into products. You need physical places to sell them. We're not like software developers, like creating software from code. And so like, it's very capital intensive. And so that's kind of exciting too, of like seeing where we as CFOs or fractional CFOs, financial controllers, how we can support our cannabis business owners in obtaining finance. Because for better or for worse, like they need a legal license, they need capital, and they need the real estate. And capital helps with licensing and real estate. And so we've just kind of taken the onus of that, of like, well, if that's capital is like the linchpin to getting these companies started, let's just find solutions for capital. And so now we're speaking with all of the various sources, because again, it's a federally illegal industry. So like most institutional capital, not applicable. Like most traditional loans for businesses, not an option. And so you got to go to these like angel investors, private equity firms, VC funds that are like created just for cannabis and hemp. So that's kind of like what's exciting. And then for sure, like I'm going to Europe next month for Barcelona. There's the International Cannabis Business Conference is in Barcelona.
Oh, wow. That'll be fun.
And so global cannabis is becoming more common. And so again, like America, federally illegal, there's no importing, no exporting. But in the rest of the world, like Canada and Colombia and other places, it's federally legal. So they can export their cannabis products to the European market. And so that's kind of also an exciting thing just for me personally, because I really like to travel. And so I'll say global cannabis business is exciting. And then the capital required to grow this industry and build it out in real time is also exciting from like a nerdy CPA perspective.
Well, what I liked about what you said, and I'm not going to make this conversation about AI, but a lot of the services, a lot of the offerings, a lot of the things that you just described, your franchises yourself doing, aren't things on the holy shit, we're not going to be able to do that anymore list that AI is going to come and replace. So it's a lot of unique advisory type positions with clients, things that aren't necessarily the redundant and mundane that AI is here to replace. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. So in our lifetime, are we going to see federally legal cannabis?
Oh yeah, for sure in our lifetime.
For sure.
I'm not going to say like very, very fast. I live in Wisconsin, a state where there's no medical. We're like one of 7 states with no medical cannabis. So it's going to happen just because of like the tax implications. It's like, I don't know, Uncle Sam wants tax revenue. We pay a lot of taxes. But then also it's just the health and wellness as a whole, more people are becoming much more interested in healthy alternatives, living a healthy lifestyle. Less people are drinking alcohol, less people are really drinking alcohol. And so it's like, and even people like nobody smokes cigarettes anymore. And so it's like they're turning to these healthy alternatives of like adult beverages that intoxicate, but not through alcohol. And so you're seeing cannabis companies like that, hemp derived companies, and soccer moms are down with edibles and beverages. And so just like the acceptance of more and more people, I think will make it legal. And, but at the end of the day, like once it goes federally legal, they're still going to need accounting and finance. There's tons of other legal industries that still need accounting and finance. And so that's why, again, like, because cannabis had such a unique tax code, a lot of tax CPAs got in just to do taxes, and like they are kind of stressed because like once it's federally legal, yeah, they'll still need to file taxes, but it's not as easy of a sale of like I do taxes. And so it's like that's where we feel good because like every industry needs CFOs. Every industry
Right.
needs good financial controls and a financial controller to make sure it happens. And so that's where we're trying to be ahead of the federal legalization by like kind of embedding ourselves with these cannabis companies and not just providing them audit or tax services.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I want to back up. You said that you started and ran around a few firms, and then you went to finance. Like, what was your what was your emotional state when you made that move from big accounting to finance?
Yeah, it was funny, and it's like for sure I was the way I would describe it is it's like I remember when I got to the CPA firm and I'm like studying for my CPA exam. I got my 150 credits. I got the master's. I'm like, man, once I get the CPA license, everything will be better. It's just like it's the chaos of like going to work every day, studying in the evening, studying in the morning. You pass a few exams, one fails, and you got to redo that one. You're like, this is taking forever. And then once I got the CPA license, it was cool for like a few weeks, maybe even a few months, and then it was just like back to the grind. Like there was no party, there was no promotion, there was no massive pay raise. It was just like, yeah, you're one of us now. We're all CPAs. I was like, God. So then like I got recruited because I honestly wasn't looking for a job, which I think this is also indicative of just like the CPA minds of like I wasn't even looking. Like I got headhunted, and I was like, a finance role for Johnson Controls. Like look it up. It's like all right, big huge pubco in Milwaukee where I'm from, and I was like, all right, let me check it out. And like went through the interview. And then actually when I got the job offer, like my emotional state was I was actually nervous to transition from being a CPA to a finance professional. And I actually like I didn't turn it down, but I brought it to a partner that I trusted and kind of like ran it past him. Like, what do you think I should do? And yeah, he luckily was, kind of had a good head on his shoulder. He's like, yeah, Ray, like you should take this. Like, you're definitely like in a good stage of your career. But I was worried. I was like worried about my ability to make the transition successfully. It's like, I knew how to do audits. I knew how to run them. I knew how what I did flowed into the other team's thing. But realistically, like I had to take the jump because like emotionally, like I was looking at the partners, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, all of them are out of shape. It's not like the best. Like one of them has like an open affair with his secretary. I was just like, all right, I'm like looking around, like, I don't think I want any of these people's lives.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, at least the CFO that I've been auditing and the financial controller persons that seemed more interesting. And so that's when I was like bold enough to make the jump. But yeah, I was originally a little bit worried. And then once I joined the team, it kind of was founded because it was like a very sharp finance team because it was in it was in 100 countries. So they would source the best finance professionals by country. So like my team was very diverse, which was awesome. I had managers that were from Brazil, from India, from Tunisia, from Mexico, from America, but like they're very sharp. And so that was kind of cool to see finance done at that Fortune 100 level where like they kind of have unlimited resources. So it's like
Right.
not much is a problem. They're like, oh, we want to look into this. Let's hire RSM consultants and we'll do a 5 why analysis of why because I went through like 3 big, huge analysis of like, why are we not driving more sales to cash conversions? And you dive deep into that process. Yeah. And then it's like, why are we not collecting the cash on the time that we're supposed to? Why is our AR aging? But like, they just throw money at it. And so that was good because I got to see what a finished finance team looks like with like, CFO, VPs, directors, managers, all the way down. But it was an interesting thing of like kind of rising to the occasion, so to speak.
Well, I think you bring up a good point just in the sense that I think when you're in public accounting, it's hard for you to imagine what it's like outside of that. it's hard for you to imagine you'll be successful outside of it. You start to kind of believe that, you're only meant to do public accounting and you don't have the ability to be anything else. And there's some fear there that kind of keeps, I think, a lot of people in public accounting, is that they don't know what they otherwise would do, or they don't think they can do anything else. But the truth is, as a CPA or someone in accounting, you're building up so many different skills outside of just having technical knowledge. I mean, working strategy, how to communicate with clients, how to serve clients, how to build a team, how to lead a team. So many really great skills that complement either being an entrepreneur or going into finance or whatever it might be. That doesn't, you don't have to be stuck in it. But I work with a lot of folks that leave public accounting, and I work with a lot that stay, but they all go through that stage of, fear. They also share some things like you did about, I look up and I see what my leaders are, and I don't want to be that. And I'd much rather, have people look up to me and want to be me. And so they leave so that they can set their own leadership path and be excited about it. Well, it's an interesting conversation around that emotional side of making a big leap, moving either into finance or running your own business. I've made some mistakes as a coach. One of the mistakes I made as a coach once is I helped someone leave public accounting to become an entrepreneur, and they were extremely passionate about the thing they wanted to do, but they were not extremely passionate about being an entrepreneur. And I didn't catch that when I was working with them. And so I was so caught on, this is what they want to do, and this is going to be great for them. And I helped them get there. And then 2 or 3 months later, they left their own business and went back into, I don't remember, they went into a private industry. But being an entrepreneur is something that I think, your franchises are all experiencing, you're experiencing. And I think it's just, it's an important piece to this.
For sure. And I would say, like, the big thing of, like, and just to kind of give some of the CPAs or accountants hope that are listening to this, like, the reason you're so good at transitioning to finance or business ownership, like, if you do want to go down that path, is, like you said, like, the two big things that we see is you've dealt with client service before. Like, whether you're on audit or tax, you have business clients, and you got to work with them clients to get you support. You got to work with them via email. You got to communicate with them. You got to set expectations with them. You got to set deadlines. So, like, just client service experience with, like, no one's excited when their auditors show up. No one's really excited to talk to their tax guy. And so, like, having to work with clients that are, like, lukewarm with you, and you got to bring the excitement and the fun. It's like, you learn that as a CPA and, like, working in audit and tax, and then leading teams. It's like, man, like, as the organizations get bigger, it's exclusively like teams rolling up with teams, and being able to manage like 2 to 3 teams at once with 2 to 3 different objectives. Like, you learn that as an auditor or a tax person, because, like, you'll have multiple audits or tax engagements going on, and it's like, okay, we have this, we're trying to wrap this one up, but we also have this current one that's happening for 2 weeks, but I got to plan for the future one, or else we're going to show up and it's going to be a mess. So I got minimum 3 engagements and 3 teams going on at once. And so, like, that's some of that great stuff where, like, your time as a CPA, like, really sets you up for success. And then, once you join either a finance team or own your own business, like, that's kind of the decision tree. Like, I walk people through. It's like, hey, like, regardless if you go the franchise route or business ownership route, like, do you want to maintain being an employee, even if it's like a well-paid one, or do you want to be a business owner? Because, like, it's not for everybody. And I made that mistake as well when I was a bit younger. It's like, everybody needs to be a business owner. It's the coolest thing ever. Why would you not want to do this? And, like, now I'm a bit wiser, and it's like, hey, it's not all cracked up to be. There's still a ton of shit when you're the boss. It's like, you still got to deal with stuff, like, but so it's not for everybody. And some people make absolute awesome rock star teammates. And so that's kind of what we've learned is, like, somebody needs to own the business, but you're not going to do it alone. Like, you're going to need a team with you, whether it's 1, 2, 3 people. And so, business ownership isn't for everybody, but I feel like it's for more people than they give credit to, but they don't have a long enough time horizon. And the nature of accountants is, like, we're perfectionists. Like, debits equal credits. Like, so we can see it plain as day when we did our job perfectly, and you can see it when we don't. And it's like, we take that same mentality to, like, business ownership of, like, everything needs to be perfect. I need to know everything about the industry and my client ahead of time in advance before they ask it, and then I'll start a business. And it's like,
that doesn't work.
It's way more messy than that. So, like, that's kind of, I feel like, a tick that we have as CPAs of, like, well, I don't because we are kind of thought of as the smartest person in the room, and like other CPAs definitely hype up other CPAs. And so like we get our kind of like our crack show when we get around business professionals, where it's like the business professionals are just businessmen or women. They got to pay a CPA to do the taxes and maybe create some financial statements, but they're worried about the business and driving profits. And so that's where it kind of gets intimidating, where it's like, oh, we're not just important just because we're the CPA. It's like, no, you got to drive results. But that's okay. Because like, again, like if you can pass the CPA exam, you can learn all this other stuff. It's just like being humble enough in your 30s and 40s to like learn something new, where it's like when you're in your 20s, you're like, I'm just trying to be a CPA. Of course, I don't know everything. But it's like, dude, you could be in your 40s and starting a business for the first time. You're not going to know everything. And that's okay.
Well, I think that word humble
like
is
CPAs.
Yeah, I think that word humble is something that I think CPAs sometimes can be too humble in knowing their value and what they provide and what they can do. And I think that holds them back sometimes. And
yeah, it's
and
weird.
That's an opportunity for them. Tell me, we're going to start kind of wrapping up. So tell me a little bit about how anyone who happens to listen will be able to reach out to you and learn more about you and maybe even contact you.
Yeah. So I'm a pretty modern man. I'm out there on the internet and everything. So whether it's email, LinkedIn, I would say LinkedIn and email are the easiest way to get a hold of me. And so we'll have my email in here. And
Yep.
dopecfo.us is our website for cannabis business owners. And then for sure, we have our community. Like we're still an education business. There's anywhere between 350 to 500 accountants in our community at any given time. There's a Facebook group where everybody daily is like interacting with client issues, wins, losses. And then every week we have a video call with Andrew on just like client service side. And then once the next week is with our marketing team on branding, websites, marketing lead magnets to try to help people with business development. So that's kind of where you can find us. And then we're pretty active for sure in the cannabis industry, but I'm also trying to become more active in just the accounting industry as a whole. And so you'll see us at some AICPA events, some accounting and bookkeeping events in California, Utah. We're going to try to be a little bit more active on the circuit, but otherwise we're just a quick Google away, and I'm always willing to talk with people. That's my role with the business, so to speak. So always willing to talk to accountants, CPAs. And because like I was that accountant who became a CPA, and I was that CPA who transferred to finance and then business ownership, like I've gone through all of the emotions. I've done all of like the scary things, and it's like, and I'm still here, and I can vouch for myself. Like I'm just a normal guy from Wisconsin, like nothing special. So yeah, if you're looking to chat, like definitely willing to chat, and I would encourage people to reach out, because when we talk with people, we learn, and when we learn, we have more clarity, and that always helps.
Good, thanks for that. And we will include contact information as well as website and all that good stuff when we put this podcast out there, so that they can make sure they reach out to you. And in closing, Raymond, anything you'd like to share as we wrap this podcast up?
I mean, I just want to say thanks for having me, Doug. Like, I really appreciate what you're doing. And when I was working for my CPA firm, like maybe I just wasn't looking for it, but there didn't exist much community talking about like the actual struggles about it. It's like, and everything happened in silos. Like the staff bitch to the other staff, the managers bitch to the other managers, the partners bitch to the other partners. And so like, just my like kind of like passing remarks with other accountants, CPAs is just know, like, you're not alone. Like if you're not totally stoked about what you're doing, it's okay. Like there's other accountants, CPAs kind of going through it as well. But also like be patient with yourself. Like having kind of lived a little bit more now, I'm like, I remember wanting everything to happen so fast and being frustrated that it wasn't. And it's like, some of this stuff does just take time, but there is like an amount of time of like, once you've hit it, just move on. And so it's like, kind of like what I say is like, have the patience to put in the time to build like the real skills. Like trust your gut when you think you have the character traits to be successful and you have the skills, like be bold enough to move on, and then just be consistent. It's like, I feel like I've seen CPAs like jump way out of CPA and get into hospitality, and they're going to buy a hotel. And it's like, it just seems like too big of a gap. It's like, if you're already good at accounting and finance, you can find tons of cool companies to do that for. And like, again, like if I didn't do this for cannabis, I would have done it for construction. And like my plan C was Red Bull. Like I like extreme sports. I like dirt bikes. I'm like, I'll just go work for Red Bull. Like that company seems like they're doing interesting stuff. So like,
okay.
Just know that there's tons of cool companies that want good accounting and finance. And obviously like I found my home with, I think, very cool cannabis companies. And so just, be patient, but also like be bold when you think you have the skills and it's time for you to do something else, and just be consistent with like who you are. And like a last kind of rant, because that's the logic side. The emotional side is like, it's okay to be your authentic self. Like I was kind of always trying to find my path, and I love to travel and didn't really take like a very standard route, but pretty standard route. And so like now that I feel like I'm very much my authentic self every day, like I have more peace because I have unlimited runway. Whereas like when I was like trying to be a CPA, but not really fitting in there, and trying to be a finance person on Wall Street, but not really fitting in there, I was like not really being my authentic self. And like, I don't know, like my mental state suffered because of it. So it is kind of about like, you know, be professional, but also like find a place that accepts you for who you are, because they exist. And that's probably the positive note I'll end with.
It's a hard job to put on a mask and pretend to be something you're not every day.
Yeah. And when so many of us do it, you know, and so it's like, and to some extent for sure, you know, we got to be professionals, but no, it's a hard way to do that forever. And kind of like Steve Jobs said, like, you got to have excitement and passion about what you're doing, because it's going to be tough. And so like, that's why it's like better to find something or some cause or some business that even when it gets tough, it's still worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to keep you waking up every morning. Well, Raymond, thank you very much for joining us on this podcast. It was an honor to have you, and we appreciate your time and energy into this. And this will wrap up this episode of the Practicing Accountant Podcast. We hope you enjoy it. Please share and like this episode amongst your own community. And we look forward to seeing you back here on the Practicing Accountant Podcast. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Be well.